Next, we're going to have on stage Asen Kovachev of Automation project, and he's actually going to speak a lot about automation and how blockchain can be used as an automation tool. He'll also address the current hype, and we'll see what other interesting insights he'll have. So please welcome Asen.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I want to make a slight correction here. This is Automaton. It's easy to confuse. That's all right. I want to first say thank you to all the organizers. I think it's amazing what you guys have put together for such a short amount of time. So let me say a few words about myself. I started very early, just hacking away, programming. My parents got me a computer when I was only 9 years old, and I had nothing else to do, really. That was my passion. Luckily, I also didn't have games, so I just kept programming. Ironically, I also went into game development later on. Did that for a long time, went to California. It was quite interesting. What really brought me there was innovation, the ability to just imagine your own world and create these virtual environments and bend the laws of physics, if you will. That was great. Then I went and did some automated trading with the hedge fund. That was very interesting to apply artificial intelligence in the stock markets. And then at Google, I spent 5 years. I learned a lot about scalability and rapid development. It was a great experience, really the best company I've ever worked for. However, at some point, I decided I'm no longer going to work for a company. I got really interested in these cryptocurrencies. I read the Bitcoin white paper. The blockchain technology, as described, really fascinated me with how simple it is, how it really is, truly is genius, and a lot has happened since then. And so I left all that and decided to pursue innovation in the blockchain space, or I would want to say crypto space, because blockchain is really just a small part of it. And so we created this Automaton network project. Enough about me. So why are we all here today? We're here. We hear this word blockchain, this, blockchain, that. I'll say as much as I'm fascinated by it, I'm also kind of getting a little bit of feeling that this is just this buzzword, that it's being overused and abused. And really, to me, what's really important is not blockchain so much. What I care about, other than innovation, is decentralization. So I'm really interested in decentralization, and that's the main focus of what we're trying to do at Automaton, is to find ways to decentralize. So again, that of course led to the blockchain hype. I'm not going to talk about all the craziness in this space, but I just want to point out a few problems that I see. So let's look at them. First of all, what's a blockchain? It's a chain of blocks. It's linear. It's one after the other. So if you want to verify something, you got to go all the way to the beginning and verify everything that has happened. So that has problems, okay? And I'm going to go into that later, but in general, we need to find other structures that are not serial but parallel. And so scalability is a big issue. Scalability, in general, we have long ways to go. I mean, a Visa is capable of doing 65,000 transactions per second. If we were to do this with, say, Bitcoin, we would need 11 terabytes of data per year. That's just 1 year. I mean, what if 10 years pass, 100 years? You know, like, I mean, all that data sits there, and we can't really do that because there's going to be bandwidth issues. Of course, there's light clients, but that leads towards this, centralization. And again, I care about decentralization. And so, yeah, I mean, I personally don't think blockchains scale, and I don't think they're ever going to scale the traditional blockchains. However, I think there's a lot of work in off-chain scaling solutions, and that's what I'm really passionate about and interested in it. Then there's all these syncing issues. You have to install this wallet and sync all that data. And how many of you have tried to install an Ethereum client for the first time, and you're sitting there and waiting and waiting and waiting, and it just goes on forever. And so, yeah, bandwidth storage requirements for each client. If we want to have true decentralization, we all have to be responsible for this. We all have to run a node that's adding to this decentralization, that's helping decentralization. But you know, these light clients are not helping, so someone has to run those full nodes. And then, of course, mining, that process is very interesting in its concept, but it leads to mining pool centralization, which is also a problem. Shameless plug, we actually have a mining algorithm we're working on that will make pools obsolete so that anybody can mine without worrying about pools. So the point here is that we need to go beyond the blockchain. We need to move that innovation beyond the blockchain because it can't alone solve all these problems. And so since we care about true decentralization, we want to be part of that. Just to show a few examples here, we don't have much time, but I want to make this important distinction that many people really miss on, that blockchain and decentralization are not the same thing. We hear people, we're going to do this on the blockchain, we're going to do that on the blockchain. But what does that mean? Are you saying you're going to decentralize it or not? Of course, don't get me wrong, blockchain has its space, especially for businesses, as the first lecturer, Ivan Vankov, mentioned. Huge benefits for business. But in terms of decentralization alone, it's not going to help. And so decentralization and blockchain, not all blockchains are decentralized, and not all decentralized networks actually use blockchain. So a few examples, in fact, we had decentralized networks long before we had Bitcoin, before we had blockchain. BitTorrent, as many of you may know, existed long before that. IPFS has some elements of blockchain, but it can run by its, basically, all it does is you find content by a hash, and it's somewhere on the computer, and yeah, so it doesn't require blockchain to operate. There's a few more examples. Bitmessage, IOTA, and Hashgraph are very interesting. There are examples of actually moving beyond the blockchain. The Tango doesn't have blocks. It just uses the next transactions as validating the previous transactions. So each transaction has a little bit of mining, and together they form a mining power that reaches consensus. Hashgraph is also interesting. In Hashgraph, it's similar to IOTA in the sense that there's basically those paths and graphs where validators are reaching consensus, except for here we have validators. And it's also centralized, and it has a patent, which is a big turnoff for me. I'm against patents if we're going to live in a true open world. So a little bit about Automaton. Where are we going with all this? So Automaton, our ambition is to build this platform where people can just create their own networks and launch their own protocols without having to start from scratch. So it's a network of networks where anybody can just add a new network that's interacting with the other networks. As we're building this, we're actually early on, we have a dedicated core team. However, we early on are trying to apply processes such that we can achieve decentralized collaboration. That's something that many people talk about, DAOs and in general, decentralized organizations or governance. We want to create a process where anybody can join this project and their participation will be recorded. So it's a small thing, but I think it will go far. And so we'll learn a lot about it because I don't know if anybody else has done that yet. Many people promise doing that, but we're actually going to do it. Then I'll talk a bit more about smart protocols in a moment, but basically really that's the essence of what we're doing is smart protocols at scale where each smart protocol is its own network, you launch it, and it's part of this bigger network. And finally, we're starting with the tools. We're building tools so that anybody who wants to do research in this space and actually move it forward can just come in, define their protocol, test it, get all people to participate and see the results, and then publish their results. So in that, we're also helping to push the R&D forward. So what are these smart protocols I keep talking about? You have all heard of smart contracts, but what the hell is a smart protocol? All right, well, let's first review what is a peer-to-peer protocol. So any peer-to-peer, any peer-to-peer client that you download, like Bitcoin or BitTorrent or IPFS or any of these programs, they form a peer-to-peer network. Like all of us here, you're talking to your neighbors, and they talk to their neighbors. So it's just this whisper protocol where they're each sharing the information without the necessity of a centralized server. So we need a way to discover our peers because there's no central server to trust. We need to communicate over the network. We need to store some data locally. That's although not necessary. We need to know how we're talking. What is the message format? How am I talking to you? What language are we speaking, right? We each need to understand each other. We each need to follow this protocol. And then we all need to have like a message handler. What happens when I receive a message? How do I handle it? How do I verify it? Do I throw it away? Do I process? Then the cryptography functions and consensus algorithms are typical for P2P networks where there's also cryptocurrency. So we think these are, if we have all these components, you can build pretty much any peer-to-peer protocol. And that's basically what we're going to do. So let's just summarize here that we view a peer-to-peer network, the protocol is like the constitution of this network. In other words, we all abide by this constitution. Right now, that's usually done by the code, right? So how do we know the protocol for Ethereum? Well, you download the code, and the code follows the rules. And that's the constitution. But that constitution is entirely written by the core developers. So in Automaton, we want the smart protocol to be that formally specified constitution that's not controlled just by the core developers, but the network participants, anybody can come in and make suggestions on how we can improve this protocol, what should it be. So why would we use this? Well, I mean, we want the community to dictate the policy, not just the core developers. We see all the problems in forking debates that happen in all these other projects. We want to prevent the hard forks. We want to prevent any client downloads, installations. You know, like we have this one tool that does it all. Then we really care about the interoperability, so we think smart protocols will help with that, so that one smart protocol could talk to another, so we can have interchain operability, which creates value for everybody. And finally, custom protocols, like if we're doing video streaming, that has no space, no place in blockchain. As someone earlier mentioned, for messaging, you really can't use the blockchain. I mean, you can use it to maybe identify who you're talking to, but what I'm talking to you is just between you and me. So we encrypt that data and we send it. We don't need a blockchain for that. Researchers need to run their peer-to-peer experiments, so we're hoping this will really, like I said earlier, help push this forward. So, in other words, we believe smart protocols are a stepping stone towards true decentralization. And whether we or someone else does it, we believe this will happen in the next, I don't know, years, decades, but that's where things are going. Thank you so much. I'm open for questions.
Fantastic. This is the second presentation to stick to the schedule, so thank you very much.
I worked hard on compressing it. It was much longer.
Great stuff. Let's get a couple of questions from the audience. Okay, nothing at the moment. Question from me. Automaton.
Yes.
That word, I'm pretty sure, is 200 years old. Why did you settle on automaton? And because it confused me with automation, obviously.
I know.
What's the origin? I mean, what's the story?
Let's just say that I'm not in charge of the branding, but if you look at the description, it's just you following a specific set of rules. And it's also, this word, it's really, in Bulgarian, I think it's like an automat, like in a vending machine, it could be an automaton, right? So anything that just follows a predetermined set of rules. And so yeah, I mean, it's...
And that's a very good comparison, because I've read articles comparing blockchain and smart contracts to a vending machine. So it's actually, there's a very good analogy there.
Okay. Yeah, we would be the vending machine where you can plug in something and get a whole network out of it. So there you go.
Sounds exciting.
All right.
Any questions from the audience?
And feel free to talk to me after that. I'm a very approachable guy, so.
I think they're all hungry, that's why.
Yeah, that must be. Thank you so much.
Thank you.